Welcome everybody to the University of Dallas Rome orientation meeting. This afternoon I would like to reflect with you on what it means to travel abroad, but specifically I would like to focus my attention on how we can have a positive and rewarding cross-cultural journey. To travel abroad is a unique, formative, and cultural experience. In the age of globalization, we are all exposed to different countries, cultures, and people that communicate with one another. To travel and to sojourn in Italy will not be an exception. In fact, you will be exposed to one of the richest cultural heritage in the world, with its own identity, values, and customs. You will be able not only to travel, but also to live in Italy to experience the Italian culture. Experience the Italian culture. By saying these words, the majority of you are already thinking of how exciting this experience will be. You will be strolling in the Via del Centro in downtown Rome after a long day spent with your friends and professors visiting museums, monuments, churches of the Città Eterna. You will discover new neighborhoods of Rome, for example, Trastevere and its trattorie, where you will taste traditional pasta dishes. But being Italian, let me ask you a couple of questions. Does this picture symbolically represent all what the Italian culture has to offer? And also, I would like to ask you, does this picture represent what tourists and foreigners in living in Italy will remember about my country? And I think that in order to have a successful cross-cultural journey, we should ask ourselves the following questions before packing our luggage. What does it mean to live abroad? What does it mean to live abroad in what we call a cross-cultural dimension? Are there similarities and differences between the culture of the host country and our own? How can we overcome in a certain way these cultural differences? Are we familiar with the core values of the host country? How can we get prepared for this cross-cultural journey? And also, I know some of you will ask, why do we have to ask ourselves all these questions? Don't you agree that modern means of mass communication and their instant accessibility have reduced the distance between different worlds? You just need to have access to your computer, right? Or your smartphone, to have all information you need about the country you're going to visit. So why is it still essential in 2014 to learn and understand the differences in cultures? Could we not just assume that in the world, well, we're just different people, and we accept this fact? Are we not already aware of what the definition and meaning of culture entail? So let's, of course, reread the definition of culture. The perceptual structure of human activities that include behaviors, values, customs, beliefs, languages, rituals, and manners, religion, laws, morality of a particular country. Well, when you decide to live in a foreign country, it is important to recognize the significance of this intercultural interaction and what this interaction will entail. This is the key to avoid confusion, misinterpretation, and misunderstanding between two people who belong to different cultural backgrounds. And what is essential to a successful intercultural interaction is not to acknowledge the fact that we are different, but to understand and to respect our cultural differences. And in a certain way, of course, to be able to decode the invisible sources of the culture. Of course, it is necessary to emphasize the importance of layers of culture. In each culture, each individual, of course, will interact in a different way compared to another. As a consequence, it's even more essential in our intercultural interaction to keep this feature into consideration to have a successful intercultural communication. So why is it so important to talk about cross-cultural communication when we live abroad? And let's read the definition of cross-cultural communication. Interacting with and or comparing two or more culture and understanding their values, their beliefs, and their norms. In our modern global world, I would say that the practice and the understanding of how to communicate cross-cultural is even more essential, not only of course, in the business world, but also when you travel and you sojourn abroad for a long period of time, as you will do. It is normal that after the few interactions with Italians, you will discover some similarities, but also a lot of differences regarding manners, beliefs, norms, and how Italians conceive and live their life. You will be naturally inclined to compare, which is normal, your own culture and the Italian one. But being able, and again I underline, to understand the differences, not the similarity of course, the differences, of course will help you to have a positive intercultural exchange. So how can we communicate cross-culturally? And I would like, of course, to emphasize some that for me they are important. Of course, there are 10 strategies, right? But some for me are a little bit more important compared to others. Don't be intimidated. Ask questions. That's perfectly fine, of course, in a different culture. Even if you don't speak fluent Italian, it's okay. Be yourself and ask questions. Don't be intimidated about that. Listen actively, okay? Be flexible. This is my number 3. Respect the differences, of course. And another one that I think is very important, avoid stereotyping. And of course, distinguish different kind of perspective. So what does it mean to live abroad? Of course, if you look at the picture over there, the culture is like an iceberg. So we have visible behaviors, and we have invisible sources as well. So live across cultures means that you adapt your behavior, your communication, and your reaction to the host culture, languages, and surroundings. You have to develop what's cross-cultural awareness. Means that you have to understand and appreciate the deep functioning of the culture. Not just what is visible is going to be in front of you, but you're going to be able to try to understand why you're there, their values, beliefs, and assumptions. This, of course, is a little bit more difficult. And develop, of course, the cross-cultural skills. Recognize the similarities and be able to react positively to the difference of the host culture. And as soon as we arrive in the host country, we start adjusting to our new environment. And we start communicating with locals. Or at least, we try, of course, our best to do so. Verbal communication and body language are one of our first tools that help us communicating with locals when we are abroad. Even if we do not master the language, few basic sentences help us to get by. It is essential for us to remember that language is much more than conveying thoughts through grammar, structures, and vocabulary. It implies a cultural competence. By cultural competence, we have to keep in mind in our interactions when, where, how, and why we're saying and conveying our messages. If the language barrier can sometimes be an obstacle to our interactions, we can always rely on a positive and friendly attitude, using a relaxed body language to facilitate our exchange with our interlocutors. And I would like to share with you this photograph that was taken in the city of Florence in 1951. Maybe I don't know if some of you recognize it, by Ruth Orkin, an American photographer and photojournalist who in the same year Life magazine sent on an assignment to Israel. From there, she went to Italy, and it was in Florence that she met Jinx Allen, a painter and a fellow American. One morning, the two were talking about their shared experiences traveling alone as young single women, and they decided to go and took some picture in the city of Florence. In the first picture, Orkin photographed her friend while she was asking for directions. It looks like she's holding, of course, you can see a map or a sort of an Italian guidebook that is helping her to discover what is around her. She's standing in the middle of the street, interacting with the Italian vigile, the traffic officer, who is giving her direction, pointing up her finger using body language, along with explanations and directions. She's standing next to her bike, and we have the sensation that she started behaving as all the people around her. Maybe she started feeling Italian among other Italians. She's discovered a new city, and she's trying to, of course this is what we tend to do at the beginning, to imitate the action of the locals when we're abroad. So Orkin and her friend were experiencing that particular moment what we can define in cross-culture the explicit culture. That means that the sojourner experienced the concrete factors of culture, what is there, what is tangible and visible. The explicit culture cannot be just a visit to a museum or admire the architecture of monuments, but it extends also to verbal and non-verbal interaction with locals. And again, in the second picture, the explicit culture is displayed. Orkin photographed, of course, her friend while she's having a wonderful time in Florence. She's sitting in an outdoor cafe, talking and flirting with a man, probably not Italian, presumably an English speaker reading a foreign newspaper, the Herald, in an Italian bar. It looks like we're watching an old movie, don't you agree? Two foreigners living in the Italian dolce vita, enjoying their time in the city of Florence. By imitating the same gesture and accomplishing the same actions of life, style, of course, of the locals, the travelers have the impression that they immediately overpass their first obstacles of living abroad. By living the same lifestyles of locals, the traveler immediately have the sensation to start belonging to their new environment. And in a certain way, I would agree, they do. Their sensation of being outsiders starts fading away. They start their process of getting accustomed to the culture, different customs, rituals, manner of the host country. Although this might be true, it happens frequently that sojourners tend to confuse these first actions and their first basic interactions with locals with the knowledge of the core values and of the host culture. So what do I mean by saying that? Simply by asking direction to go to an art museum or drinking a coffee at the bar doesn't mean to be acquainted with the norms of the host country and fully, truly understand the implied meaning of the values and the beliefs of the host country. Getting used to a country and to the practical everyday life doesn't necessarily imply an immediate adjustment and understanding of the core values, right? So it can happen that sojourners sometimes can face what in cross-cultural communication we call, of course, a cultural clash, a cultural shock. The loss of set of daily practical routines can be exciting at the beginning. It's part of the adventure. An exciting fact to discover a new way of living, but sometimes in the long process, it can be tiring. When you live abroad, the process of adjustment is going inevitably to be constantly interrupted by what? By new cultural context, and most of all challenged by these differences, intercultural differences. And when you live abroad for a long period of time, that can be exhausting after a while. You lose your set of your own culture. So living this complete immersion experience in another country will oblige you to respond not only to novelties in a non-familiar environment, but to novelties of a subtle and complex patterns of daily life. I'm sure you recognize this picture. Of course, in 2011, marked the 6th year celebration of this famous picture taken always in 1951, American Girl in Italy. And again, of course, in the city of Florence, at the corner of the street, near the famous pastry shop, Il Caffè Gilli. The cafe, now famous, of course, for their pastries and hot coffees, and a perfectly preserved example of Belle Époque, Cafe of Florence, became famous worldwide, becoming a tourist destination, thanks also to this picture. The cafe was a popular destination for writers and artists, but of course, it changed a little bit. It didn't become so, it didn't last this importance that it had back then. Looking at this third picture, I was impressed how a young American woman was walking down the street in a foreign country, in a foreign town, with such confidence, surrounded by Italian men who were sharing and conveying her their evident interest. In this particular picture, it is evident that, of course, no other women are in the scene, and the looks of these gentlemen are focusing on just one female pedestrian. Although Orkin and Greg have always declared in their interviews that back in those days they were amused by this unique experience of traveling abroad and taking pictures in a foreign city, look at this photograph, some question and reflection came up in my mind. The first question that I asked myself, being a woman and being Italian, was if Orkin and her friend, even just for a moment, they were a little bit bothered by these non-discreet looks. A second question was if these young women traveling in Italy would have asked themselves the reason why. A simple action of walking down the street would have made them the center of this overwhelming attention. A third one was if it was just the beauty, maybe, of this young woman that provoked that kind of attention from these Italian men, or was just her way she was holding herself walking down the street. Her posture actually conveyed a very, an attitude of confidence, independence, despite the right arm is folded up against her part of her body, and could give the impression to convey a gesture of self-protection. And the last question, if this picture would have been taken in a city in the United States, of course, always in 1951, but also nowadays, would this woman have attracted so evidently the looks of men? American men would in public display this kind of attention and looks? And finally, I wonder if Orkin and her friend would perceive these Italian men a little bit disrespectful, crossing a little bit the line of respect towards the opposite sex. Despite, of course, the evident beauty of this young lady, I think the attention of this Italian man was driven by the fact that this foreign woman was walking down the street on her own, especially in 1950, conveying an idea of female independence that was not seen as a positive and didn't have a positive connotation, of course, back then. So some people say, well, that was taken in 1951. We are in 2014. Things have changed. Yes and no. According to the social and cultural etiquette and norms of that time, and also to some extent even nowadays, it was not considered appropriate for a young woman to travel in a foreign country on her own. So I presume that from Orkin and her friend's perspective, that journey, of course, was exciting. They were having a good time, but in the eyes of this Italian man in that particular moment, and from a male perspective of a different culture, was not something common that they were, of course, acquainted with, and totally accepted for them to see as a common norm and behavior of a woman. So what does it mean, of course, to live in the cross-cultural dimension? And the last picture, of course, helped us to understand the meaning. And let's try, of course, to reread that. We interact in an unfamiliar social and cultural environment with our own cultural background. We're out of our comfort zone all the time, and we are out of our own social and cultural dimensions. We tend to make comparisons between our native culture, which is totally normal, and the host country culture in order to find similarities to adapt better to our new surroundings. And of course, if our cultural values and custom and behaviors are recognized by the people of the host country, well, we have the cultural clash. So some of you will say, well, now another question maybe we can ask ourselves is, are American and Italian culture so different, so far apart? According to the expert in cross-cultural communication, Mr. Lewis, yes, we're totally different. Can you see where Italy is? Is up there in the multi-active culture. A culture that has much more in common, if you see, with other countries on the other side of the ocean, like Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia, Peru. Multi-active means that we, of course, in general, of course, this culture are more warm, emotional, impulsive. And can you see where you are? USA. Of course, you have much more in common with Germany, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and of course in Great Britain than in Italy. Can you see how far we are? Okay? When you same thing, when you travel in Europe, many of my students say, well, when I go to Germany, I feel more at ease. Or when when they travel, for example, to the United Kingdom, they say, not only for the language, but I feel better when I go there. Of course, look at how, as far as culture, how you are next to one another. You have many things in common. And so look at Italy. So we are very different. So Lewis developed this method of testing cultural types that individuals can determine their own cultural profiles. Personal factors, of course, we have to remember always the layers of culture, such as age, professions, field of study, and physiological and context in which the individual operates are important factors for the categorization of the culture. So Italian is classified a multi-active culture, and North American, of course, a linear active one. So what is the characteristic? Italian culture is considered, as we saw, a multi-active, and American one a linear active. So they have, of course, different kind of characteristics. People belonging to one category or another present in general the same type of characteristic, of course. For instance, the linear active culture prefer accomplishing tasks. Also, you like in America this word, tasks. One at the time. You concentrate hard and do all within a frame of time. I like that. I can never do that. Being punctual. This is very important for you. Agendas. I don't even know what it is. Plans. My students say she never followed the syllabus. Are careful, follow to perform. This is another key word. To perform better, be more efficient, and get more done. Do you recognize yourself a little bit? Well, of course, the opposite. Multi-active cultures seem not to give much importance to schedules and plans. We pretend to observe them, of course, to get along with the linear active culture. So multi-active people consider in a certain way human interactions and talks more, of course, and talking and conveying their emotions and their feelings are more important for us than stick to our schedules, okay? We are in limited body language, plans, generals, outlines. We confront always what? With emotions and feelings, and sometimes the foreigners say, you are so dramatic, drama all the time. Well, get accustomed when you travel in Italy. How many of you have been to Italy already? Probably, oh, are we punctual? Nope. Are we inquisitive? Sometimes to be nice is being inquisitive. We ask a lot of questions because we want to know you better. And sometimes different cultures say, wait a minute, this is not your business. This is my business. Why I have to share with you? We're just traveling on the same train, but we're not even friends and we don't even know each other. So, we need to be careful about this. And this, my student know it as well, my big fault. Not only talkative, interrupts frequently. Because we're so involved in the conversation that we keep interrupting. And I do that to my students, so I apologize for that. And we display our emotional behavior, of course, all the time. So, how can we overcome these differences? When we go on a journey abroad, the first step of our trip is made at home. We always have to remind ourselves that we make the choice to live in another country. And as a consequence, we live in this cross-cultural dimension during that period of time. Of course, it's our duty, as travelers, of course, to recognize and understand the cultural differences without, and I always say that to my students, never lose your own. Don't be there and try to be Italian. Be yourself, but try to understand, of course, the differences, okay, and respect them. And also another point that I would like in this slide to underline, start expecting the local people to be themselves. They're going to react in a different way than what you're accustomed to. That's normal. So don't let sometimes your behavior, because you choose to go in their country. So you have to adapt to them. They're not going to be, of course, adapting to you in that particular moment. So, but don't let your background, your culture, in a certain way, prevent you to have a wonderful experience of living abroad, okay? So try to be always positive and knowing these differences, you know how to react positively to it. This is very important. So let's talk, of course, it's impossible for me in 55 minutes to talk about Italy, right? But let's take a look now at some cultural aspect of Italy. Can we define a single Italian cultural identity? No. Despite more than 2 million of history, Italy is quite a young country. In 2011, we have celebrated the 150 years of our political unification, happening in the 19th century in 1861. So despite this unification, Italy presents a variety, of course, of regional subcultures. In addition to that, in the last 10, 15 years, of course, I would say more or less, Italy has also become a promised land for more than 4 million immigrants who now, with their, of course, their ethnicity, has been living in Italy and have enriched, of course, the current Italian cultural heritage. And thanks to its diversity, Italy, of course, has multiple cultural identity. Each region offers different forms of micro-societies that intermingle together in order to create multiple regional differences which can be recognized in daily social interactions among people. And of course, historic events and different geographical features have contributed to establish cultural and social and economic diversity. So also, this is what I usually tell my students, also when you travel around Italy, try to know, of course, that when you travel to the north, it's not going to be the same experience than traveling to the south. And it's also nice, and it will be good before you reach the destination, to a little bit to get to know the region where you go. Of course, we are a small country, but also try to explore each region and what each region has to offer you. So the industrial north is responsible for Italy's place among the world's top industrial nations. The northern regions are closer, of course, as far as culture also, France and Switzerland and Austria in both location and spirit. People living in this region, so more the north, of course, are usually recognized to be reserved, precise, and more punctual compared to everybody else. So in a certain way, we can see that we have a little bit more in common with the linear active culture compared to our fellow citizens, of course, in the South regions. So you will experience cultural differences in how Italians behave from Milan to Palermo, for example. The rural and agricultural South is still linked to ancient customs and tradition. The southern regions have more in common with Eastern Mediterranean and North African countries than Europe as far as location, landscape, and tradition as well. So people living in this region are very social and very interactive. Italians also communicate easily among each other thanks, of course, of the use of what we learn here, the standard Italian language. The different dialects or regional Italians are proudly spoken by the inhabitants of each region. Each dialect is not considered just a linguistic and communicative tool, but it's a unique cultural identity feature of that particular part of the country, in which inhabitants, of course, identify and proudly show their regional affinity and their belonging. So that's why sometimes also students that study Italian say, I've traveled in Italy, sometimes I've had difficulties or I didn't understand. Maybe if you were talking with an elderly lady that, of course, so in Sicily, for example, she was talking dialect. That's why it's not your fault that you don't understand Italian, they're talking the dialect. See how many languages and dialects are spoken in Italy. Also nowadays, okay? So of course, different kind of region, different kind of dialects as well. And here I would like to share with you the core values in general. And some of you say, well, we have the same core values, right? In the United States. We value family, we value our friends, work, religion, our quality of life, and love, of course, for beauty. So despite, of course, the regional differences, in Italy, of course, we share, this is some of our core values, of course, and we don't have enough time to develop any of them, right? But of course, the way we live and we act upon certain values are inevitably going to be different. So of course we share, also from a cultural standpoint, we share the same values, but the way we live it and we act upon them, of course, are going to be different. So be careful about that. And the word campanilismo, which doesn't have a specific English translation, derives from campanile, the bell tower. The campanile, traditional, the tallest and most prominent building in a town or village, has become, in the concept of campanilismo, an enduring symbol of devotion, love of one region, city, town, village, and even il quartiere, so the quarter, the small district of a town. And those, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the pictures. What is the city? Have you, anybody can recognize the picture, what city is displayed there? We are in the region of Tuscany, but this is not Florence. What is it? Any idea? Siena, esattamente. Of course, I recommend everybody, when you are in Tuscany, visit Florence, to go and go to Siena. And why Siena? Because campanilismo is a very important aspect of life in Italy, symbolizing a sense of identity, of pride, and of belonging to a place of your birth, a feeling which is usually much stronger to an Italian than any sense of national identity. You will see when you're going to travel in Italy, an Italian will say, sono veneziano, I'm from Venice, sono romano, I'm from Rome, sono senese, I'm from Siena, before saying I'm Italian. Actually, we have much more this national identity when we are abroad. This is where we feel really Italian. Otherwise, when we are in Italy, each one belongs to their own region and their own town. So these days, despite Italy's political unification and the effects of mass media, which has, to a certain extent, put the Italian life together, the campanilismo and this belonging, of course, continues to exist. And one of the common cultural characteristics of Italians that they share a lot, of course, the use of the body language. They are known worldwide as excellent non-verbal communicators. Italians tend to talk a lot and love talking and interacting, and they're considered an affective culture. To convey their ideas, not only they will use extensive vocabulary, I'm almost done the word, and facial expressions, and make sure to use the correct tone of voice, pitch of voice. They don't want, of course, to be dramatic. They want you to know how they feel. There is no shame in sharing and exposing, of course, your emotions. They will appeal and pick up to your generosity, warm heart, and good sense. Italians in general tend to exhibit and not to separate, of course, the emotion. The emotion flows easily without any vision. Physical contact as well, gesture and animated expression are common in Italy. And living in Italy, the traveler will hear the expression very often, fare la bella figura, that translated into English, to make the best possible impression in different kind of occasions. But along to this expression, we can also mean and say farsi bello, but of course it goes beyond to dress well and appropriately, which of course you already do. It extends to your confidence and your style. It reflects your manners and behaviors. So despite the common association of this expression to the love that Italians have for the fashion, it goes always beyond that. So it reflects more your manners. So always wear nice, comfort, casual, or elegant clothes. It depends on where you are. It's always a sign of respect and good manners, no matter where you go, the event you attend or the people that you're with. Also, sometimes if you're going to in a supermarket, you will see people try to maybe dress up a little bit and they're just going to the supermarket. I know maybe in this culture it doesn't make absolutely any sense, but of course in our culture it's not the same. And here, so some people maybe will ask now, where can we witness the visible aspect of this Italian culture? In the numerous piazzas all over Italy that are the stages, of course, of the life of its inhabitants. Can you recognize the piazzas over there? For example, the first one on the left, on the top. What is that piazza? Any of you recognize that one? And city? Because sometimes, see how many piazzas, sometimes the tourists, after so many, okay, there are piazzas. Okay, they're all the same. Piazza del Campo a Siena, okay, is the first. The second one on the bottom and the left, any idea? People that have been to Rome, what is? Okay, the Spanish Step, Piazza de Spagna. The other one is Piazza della Signoria Firenze, and probably you don't know the last one. It's a small little piazza in Vigevano. It's a small little town next to Milan. So the picture of piazza displays this enclosed open urban space where you can witness the explicit visible culture and you can start observing some of the implicit cultural aspects of the people. Piazza where everybody gathered to see and to be seen. During the day, the piazza is a theatrical display of the daily activity, civil, religious, commercial, and tourist, whereas they assume a sentimental atmosphere in the evening. And one of my last consideration that in every piazza the tower bell beats the time. In Italy, time is viewed as synchronic, where past, present, and future are interrelated so that ideas of the future and memories of the past shape the present actions. Italians, like other cultures that share this same conception of time, do not give importance, as we said, on punctuality, schedules, and agenda. Not that the passage of time is not important, but to give time to people and sharing human interaction are much more important than, of course, to stick to your schedule of the day. Most neutral and literal culture have a sequential view of time, and it is perceived as a series of passing events. In all culture, the conception of time is affected by the culture. That's why some of you, they say, why in Italy they don't behave or they have this kind of conception is affected by the culture we have. Because time is seen as an idea rather than an object. And this influences how people in different cultures plan, organize their activities with others, and live, of course, their lives. And the last famous one, il dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. And in the conception of time, this famous expression has become one of the most popular cultural definitions linked to the idea of Italian dolce vita, the sweetness of doing nothing. Maybe in the United States, and you correct me, this expression would refer to killing time, a crude and brutal term that of course implies being lazy and doing nothing. And despite the expression could lead the foreigner to think that Italians, and myself included, we like to be lazy and we like doing nothing, for Italians this expression assumes a positive connotation. This expression not only reminds us the joy of living and sharing life with one another, but implies the delight and the spontaneity of doing things for just the pleasure of doing it. It means to let your senses be the guide, be immersed in the place that you live, and be impressed and live the non-planned aspects of your life. So in conclusion of our journey in this approach to the Italian culture, we could say that groups of people organize themselves in such a way to increase the effectiveness of their way of living. Different groups of people have developed in different geographic regions and they have formed different sets of logical assumptions. After the first approach and recognition of the explicit culture, sojourners should know the assumptions and values upon which one's own cultural behavior rests. Then they must be able to contrast this assumption and values with those, of course, of the host culture and discover the areas of cultural differences and, of course, that they are relevant in a particular moment and situation. So this mutual knowledge and understanding to the, of course, relevant cultural differences can be used to create a common ground for a successful intercultural communication and, of course, an enriching cross-cultural journey. And I wish you all a wonderful trip to my country and Europe. And, of course, the Italian department, Dottoressa Forte and I are always here to help you if you need any assistance. Grazie a tutti e grazie Becky. Thank you.